This one's going to piss some people off. There's no doubt about it. I mean, whenever you're talking about somebody's club, even if you do it in the most positive way possible, which is what I do on my main channel well, I am making fun of them, but I do it in like a nice way. They are the videos that get the most dislikes, without a doubt. So if you want to go ahead and dislike this video already, I understand. But I appreciate you watching. Today, what we're doing is we are going to be ranking the biggest soccer clubs, football clubs. All right, it's Nitro Football, Nitro Charged. Nitro Football, not Nitro Soccer. So I just want to appease all the European viewers out there. I didn't make the list. I didn't say the forbidden word. But here are all the teams that are on the list, and I have to rank them between S, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Now, remember, we aren't ranking the ones that I like the most. We're ranking them in terms of their, I guess, stature, how elite of a club they are, not just how rich they are. You could be the richest club and not be in S or A or B. You could be rich and be bad, but you can also be rich and be an S tier, which is probably going to correlate a little bit. The money you have is definitely going to correlate with how high you are in most aspects, but there are some teams, like Manchester United, who are definitely not going to go in S tier because even though they have all the money in the world, they don't know how to spend it, and they have not been good in the last decade in comparison to most of the clubs on this list. So, with that being said, we are going to go in order, and we start with AC Milan. AC Milan, big club, and used to be bigger, used to maybe be, for a period in the early 2000s, late 90s, where they were maybe the biggest club in the world. And I'm taking that into consideration. I'm not just taking them at current face value, because of course Manchester United would be in D. Manchester United have some history. And with that being said, that means they're going to be a little bit higher. And I'm using United as the reference point. But don't be offended if you are a United fan. It's easy to clown you guys right now. But I'm sure you'll be back to the top at some point in the next couple of decades. Just kidding. All right. AC Milan, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off this list by putting AC Milan in A tier. I actually think that, that might be too high. I might move them back down to B. I'm just looking at this list right now. I kind of want it to be balanced. I don't want to have everybody in A and then nobody in like C or D. There has to be some parity, so I will come back to that. Ajax is next. Another big, historically successful club. Probably the most successful in Netherlands in the Eredivisie. Didn't have a great season last year, of course, but historically great. But in the modern era, they do not compete with the greats. They do not compete with the Real Madrids. They do not compete with the Bayern Munich's of the world. So with that being said, I don't think we can put them in A anymore. But I think C would be too low. With that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and slap them in. You know what? I think we do put them in C. Because I feel like there is a B category that might have some teams that are not quite as big as AC Milan, but not quite as medium-sized as Ajax. So let's put that there. That seems good to me. I don't think, I might even move AC Milan down in a little bit. Next up, we have Atletico Madrid. Bigger club than Ajax currently, but historically, they went to the Champions League final, and it was like 1970. That might have been 1970, 1971-ish. And they played against Bayern Munich, in which they ended up tying the first leg. They lost terribly in the second leg. But other than that, they didn't have that many appearances, late in the Champions League stages until the last 10 years. This is really their golden era. With that being said, I do have to consider the fact that they are big right now. A little bit bigger than if, Ajax was big in the 80s, right? So with that being said, I'm going to put them in the same category. Have they been as big of a club as Ajax was in the past? Probably not, but they're bigger than Ajax right now in the current era. So with that being said, we're going to throw them in the same category. Next up is FC Barcelona, and I don't think that they should go into S tier. They obviously are going through a lot of financial struggles with, Joan Laporta joining and bringing a lot of the life back into the club, pulling those levers, selling a lot of the value of the TV revenue and all of that. I think they deserve to go into A tier, so I'm going to put them right there, but not quite S tier when they could go bankrupt at any moment. Next up is Bayern Munich, and this might be the first S-tier club because they've had a continued dominance for the last 50 plus years, not only in Germany, but also in European competition. They're the most successful Bundesliga club by a long shot. They've won more than half of the Bundesliga titles. They are 2 of the 10 treble wins in the history of the sport. So that's a 5th of the treble wins. They've done it twice. I really don't know if any other club has done it twice. I think Barcelona might have done it twice. Celtic's done it, of course, and they're on this list here in a minute. I think we put Bayern Munich in S tier. They are massive. Next up, we have Benfica. Benfica, a Portuguese team, have had their moments. They've had their runs, but I don't think at any point in history were they the biggest club in the world. On a list like this, you're comparing them to the best of the best. And so you have to be a little bit more harsh. I do want to use the D, E, and F tier, and maybe I won't even use the F tier today because it's not like we have any clubs on here like, Charlotte FC. All right? With all due respect to Charlotte, they're pretty new as well. I don't know if that would even be fair in the first place. But you have the best of the best on this list. So you got to be a little bit more critical. And with that being said, I think Benfica isn't even the biggest club in Portugal. And that goes to Porto. We're putting them in E tier right there. Next up is Celtic. They have won a treble. And that alone, it pushes them up. But in the modern era especially, they cannot even compete with probably mid-tier Premier League teams. They would probably lose to those teams as well. This Celtic club is iconic. Their fans are absolutely incredible, but it's just not enough. We're putting them in E tier as well. Next up is Borussia Dortmund. This is my team. I have a lot of bias. With that being said, we're putting them in S tier. Moving on. Next up, we have Everton. One of the teams that has never been relegated from the Premier League, even though they have barely escaped it for the past couple of years. They're still holding on. Dyche ball in full effect. But Everton have always been that team where, even though they're not the best in England, at least since in the Premier League era, they're never the worst, and they're always there. They're just always there. They've had some runs in European competition. They've never won a Champions League. But this Everton team and the club itself is above average, but recently they have fallen off a cliff. With that being said, we're putting them in D. They are going to go above Benfica and Celtic, and you might argue because of the fact that I said, Celtic wouldn't beat the mid-table Prem teams. Neither do Everton right now, so you've got a point there, but I'm going to stick with that right there anyway. Next up, we have Inter Milan, and their legacy, just like AC Milan, just at times incredible. They've won a treble under Jose Mourinho and led by Wesley Schneider in the early 2010s. And just obviously a lot of Italian teams, other than Juventus, had their golden era in the 90s and 2000s. And I think Inter Milan, it stays consistent with that. It's going to piss a lot of Italians off, at least half of the city of Milan. And half of the San Siro is going to be upset about this, but we're putting them one tier below AC Milan. I think AC Milan as a whole, even if not right now, I think Inter's a little bit better right now. Even if not right now, AC Milan as a club is a little bit bigger. Next up, we have Juventus. Juventus have been a very controversial club. They've been penalized probably more than any other Italian team in history. They continue to fall into issues with the Italian Federation, but their run with the 2010s winning, I think it was 10 Serie A straight, it cannot be ignored. They still have pull in world football, but their golden era, it does seem over. And even during that time, they weren't able to cap it off with a Champions League victory. And Buffon retired, actually, without a Champions League title. He would have won, I think, everything in his career. He has a Euros with Italy because he was on the roster in 2020. He's got, obviously, the World Cup from 2006. He's got the league title a freaking bunch of times. He's won the Cup. The only thing he had left was the Champions League. He couldn't get it done with Juventus, but it's not like Juventus haven't ever won it. And they've been great for a long time, too. I mean, the era of Michel Platini, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, 3 Ballon d'Ors straight as well with Juventus. We're going to put Juventus in a tier with AC Milan. We're going to put them just above Inter Milan, and I think that's going to also be controversial, but I stick with it. You've got to respect the recent modern era as well. You can't just be a nostalgia merchant. Juventus have earned it. I mean, you go a decade straight winning everything, you got to put them up there a little bit. Next up is Olympique Lyon. Now, women's side of things, they might be the best women's club in the world. Very dominant. But on the men's side of things, not so dominant. Haven't won a Champions League. Get dominated by PSG in the league and Coupe de France. They're not up there. I'm going to put them in D tier. Next up is Manchester United. We've been waiting on this one. Now, Manchester United are probably the dumbest club in the world in terms of spending money. They do not know how to spend money. Their fans celebrate transfers more than they celebrate trophies. But then again, they don't win too many of those anymore. So I don't know if a lot of the fans know what it feels like to really win an important trophy at this point. Yeah, and I know they won the FA Cup, but realistically, when you spend as much as Manchester United, you've got to have a little bit of higher standards than what they've got right now. And it's just an absolute dumpster fire. It is an absolute dumpster fire. But they're still rich enough to compete at the highest level. And they are a very, very big club. And so I think with their history being not the most winningest club in England, because I believe Liverpool just edges them out in terms of how many trophies have been won, they deserve to be up there. We're putting them in A tier right there, just below Borussia Dortmund. Next up, we've got Marseille. And Marseille is the only club out of France who have ever won a Champions League, actually. The only ever French team. I don't know what that says about the French league, but it does say that Marseille still have an edge on PSG historically with European competition. And PSG now lost Mbappe, so that might continue to be the case. But one Champions League does not define a club forever. I mean, Red Star Belgrade have won the Champions League, I think, twice. So it's not like one Champions League 30 years ago is going to put your club that high. We're also putting Olympique Marseille in, I think, E. No, well, you know what? I'm going to put them in D, but I'm also going to move Celtic up, because I think Celtic's too low. Benfica might be too low as well. I might put Everton here. That looks a little better to me. Next up, we've got Manchester City. Manchester City have not a ton of history, but they've always been around, bouncing around the top leagues of England. And finally, after getting bought out by the oil merchants, they are absolutely tearing it up. And they are the biggest club in the world, probably currently. Of course, Real Madrid is up there as well. But there's no team that can really beat Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, at least consistently. This team is so dominant. This definitely pushes them up at least a little bit, but I don't think that they've done it long enough and have enough history to be in A tier. They're going to be in B tier because of how dominant they are currently, but they, ever since 2008, anything before 2008, and they're going to be down here or here, so pre-2008, they're here. This modern era, they might be here, so we're going to meet in the middle, and we're going to put them in B. Next up, we've got AS Monaco. Monaco's a respectable club. I don't have really any beef with them. They just kind of exist to me. Obviously, they had that 2017 team with Bernardo Silva, Kylian Mbappe, Radamel Falcao, so many others that I'm probably forgetting on that team that were just absolutely dominant and still prevalent in modern football at some of the biggest clubs, including Manchester City. With that being said, I think these guys still fit into D. I'm not going to put them in E. They're respectable. They continue to compete. I think they even won a Ligue 1 a few years ago as well during a dominant PSG era. So with that being said, I'm going to put Monaco with Olympique Lyon. So next up, we've got Napoli, of course, Maradona's main club during his career. They had a really good run in the late 2010s, Gonzalo Higuain being the top scorer for a couple of years. Napoli they're in and out of being maybe the best in the league and then kind of falling into mid-table and then coming back into being the best in the league and then falling mid-table. What I will say is this has got to be one of the more exciting teams to root for in Italy. I'm going to put Napoli in C tier, but I think that at times, they definitely push their way up to competing with some of the best. Next up, we've got Porto, which I believe is a level above Benfica. I think Jose Mourinho's Porto team that ended up winning the Champions League is one of the most iconic runs of all time. Porto have consistently competed. They've won a couple Champions Leagues, not just in the modern era in the early 2000s with Jose Mourinho, but also, 30, 40 years ago as well. So with that being said, Porto are going to be one level above Benfica. Next up, we've got PSG. PSG is a dominant force owned by the Qataris now, but they still haven't won a Champions League. And with that fact alone, PSG cannot be an S tier. You can't be an S tier if you've never won a Champions League. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw them in the same category as Manchester City. But here's the deal. Manchester City, they got bought by the oil money, and they're actually winning things. They're winning trebles. They're winning Premier Leagues consistently. PSG, yeah, they're winning the Ligue 1, but how difficult is that to do right now? And they've still not won the Champions League. And as I said, now that they've lost Mbappe, what really are the odds that they do it now? Pretty low. I do love Vitinha, though. I think he's spectacular. We're going to go ahead and throw them in C tier. Yeah, you know what? Right there is honestly fine with me. I think a lot of people would be pushing for B just because of how much money they have. They do have the two biggest transfers of all time. I'm going to put them in B tier. Yeah, B tier for PSG is fair enough, but we're putting them in the back of it. Next up, we've got Rangers Football Club. I think it would be an insult to put them above Celtic. They've also got some pretty insane fans, but they don't have the success that Celtic do. Historically, we're putting them in E tier, and I'm pretty confident about that. Real Madrid have most consistently been the biggest club in the world throughout history, and with that being said, they are going to go right there, and that's just objectively got to be the case. Real Madrid are the biggest club in the world. Their elite mentality in European competition, even during off years, has to be studied. They've got some sort of witchcraft and juju that goes their way every single time, and maybe a little bit of the referees as well. But hey, when you're the biggest club in the world with that much money, you're going to get a little bit of favoritism at times. Either way, they've proven it time and time again. They're the biggest club in the world. Next up, we've got Roma. I like Roma. I'm actually a decent, like that's like my Serie A team if I had one. But I don't even really watch their league games. I don't watch Serie A very much at all. But I just kind of like Roma. With that being said, they're not bigger than most of the other Italian teams on this list. I don't even think that I can put them on the same tier as Napoli. So we're going to put them one below, and we're going to put them here in D. Roma love a European run, even if it's not in the Champions League. They'll make a Champions League run. We saw it a few years ago when they knocked off Barcelona in the quarterfinal to go into the semifinal. Manolas, the Greek god in Rome, has risen from their ruins. That was awesome. And then they won the Conference League with Mourinho like 2 years ago. They just made a run again in Europa League to like the semifinal before losing to an incredible Bayer Leverkusen side. Either way, good team. Not going to go up there with the greats. Next up is Schalke. That is a team going in F. Come on. Just a joke of a club. They're on the wrong side of the river. It's tough luck. Moving on. Next up, Sevilla. Sevilla, speaking of teams that love a European competition, talk about the dominant force of the Europa League, the Real Madrid of the Europa League, if I may. This team would finish third place in the, now former Champions League format, just so that they could go dominate the Europa League some more. This team is massive. We're going to go ahead and put them in, I'm going to put them in C tier. And I think that fits. Next up, we've got Tottenham Hotspur. Oh, man. Being a Tottenham Hotspur fan is, that must be rough. That must be just unfortunate. They're rich. But they just never get the job done. For the first month of the Premier League seasons, it seems like they're the best team in the world, and then they just fall off inevitably. They're never winning any trophies. They're not that big of a club. They're just rich, but they also don't know how to use the money. Even Manchester United uses their money a little bit better than Tottenham Hotspur, it seems. And it seems like even if Tottenham Hotspur do everything right, they just still don't have the luck fall their way at the end. I mean, we saw it in the Champions League final 2019 when they lost to Liverpool. We've seen it this year when they were dominant at the beginning of the Premier League season and then had basically their entire team get injured. Harry Kane is gone now, so they can't even blame him anymore, even though he's still not winning trophies at Bayern Munich. Tottenham Hotspur is going to go in, I think D tier is fair. I don't think we can put them on the same tier as Sevilla and Ajax, even Atletico Madrid. But we'll put them up here towards the front of D tier. Let's put them there. Next up, we've got Galatasaray, a Turkish team, the only Turkish team that's on this list, actually. So with that being said, I think Galatasaray, I mean, are they the biggest club in Turkey? You've got Besiktas. You've got, oh wait, this is this Galatasaray or Fenerbahce? This is Galatasaray. I'm going to make sure. Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay, good. Good. Okay. I could have pissed off an entire country there. I'm glad I didn't. I'm really glad I didn't. All right, Galatasaray. As I said, it's just not up there. I don't follow Turkish football a ton. I follow their fans whenever they go absolutely batshit insane. That's fun clips to see on Twitter. But all three of those clubs I could probably put in the exact same tier. And that tier is going to be E. That's where they're going to go. Next up, we have Valencia. Valencia are not one of the biggest teams in Spain. They're not going to be on the same tier as Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Sevilla. They're going to be an E tier as well. Next up, we have Arsenal. On and off, have had great periods, have had bad periods. One of the more successful teams in England, though. I think they might be third on the list of teams that have won the most trophies. Lots of longevity, lots of history, some great eras. The invincible Arsenal squad under Wenger. Sorry, his name was escaping me. Recently under Arteta, great, but not elite. I think we're going to put Arsenal in the B tier. Arsenal in B tier, just under Manchester United, I think is fair. Next up, we have Chelsea. Chelsea over the last, let's say, 20 years have been pretty great. They've had some absolutely insane teams and insane players. Hazard, De Bruyne, Salah, Lukaku. But they let most of those guys go. At least they kept Eden Hazard. Either way, Chelsea definitely, with such dominance over the last 20 years, deserve to be a little bit up there. But I'm not even going to put them on the same tier as Arsenal. I think Chelsea are going to go into C tier. Then we have the winningest club in the history of England. Are they on the same tier as Real Madrid? Probably not. But are they on the same tier as Manchester United? You could argue maybe a little bit higher. Manchester United a little bit better during the Premier League era. Took Liverpool a little while to get that job done. But when it comes to European competition, they've won quite a few Champions Leagues, and they've obviously been at the top level of European football since forever. So with that being said, they're going to go in A tier as well. Now, what I want to clarify is that even though these teams are, like S tier, A tier, and then there's an order like Dortmund, then Real Madrid, then Bayern Munich, don't worry about the order. Just worry about the category that I put them in. Like, I'm not really putting AC Milan in front of Barcelona, but I'm also just not going to go through and order them individually. So that's one thing I wanted to clarify. But the Dortmund in first is true. That part you can take seriously. Dortmund is the best, and you can take it, of course, Schalke being the worst very seriously as well. That's it for today. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.